say they plan to sue her for defamation.
Any discovery that goes to prove that this conspiracy is true is discoverable.
And here's the text from the actual document. Defendant Reed and Mr. Kearney, both in concert and separately, have defamed and substantially injured the Commonwealth witnesses.
Colin Albert was not there, and Jennifer McCabe did not Google how long did I call. Those are just two things he sticks to. Both incorrect. Both incorrect.
Building and building and building until eventually they are going to explode. Reed drunkenly backed her SUV into O'Keefe while dropping him off at the gathering.
Now, 5 people who Reed's lawyers have repeatedly tried to blame say they plan to sue her for defamation.
Breaking news, it appears the McAlberts are launching an attack, suing people for defaming them. Let's watch.
Brian and Nicole Albert, Jen and Matt McCabe, and Brian Higgins claim in a new court brief that Karen Reed concocted a, quote, vile work of fiction in order to, quote, evade responsibility for her actions.
Blueprint is pick out witnesses, destroy their reputations, attack them, torture them.
The 5 witnesses say they also plan to sue Aidan Kearney, the blogger known as Turtleboy, who promoted Reed's version of the case.
In this whole thing, I've vocalized my opinions about the Karen Reed case and the witnesses involved in it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the episode of The Lawyer You Know. And I have had so many questions come out today about an article talking about Turtleboy and Karen Reed potentially being sued by the McCabes, the Alberts et al. For defamation.
And there's our favorite attorney who's so good looking he can rock a 70s porn mustache and still look good.
Let's get to it.
Wow, what an opening.
We are going to start with this article. Karen Reed case, Alberts, McCabes, Higgins.
Brian Higgins.
Eyeing defamation claims against Reed and Turtleboy. The witnesses from Reed's high-profile case are denouncing her cover-up claims as a vile work of fiction.
The handsome lawyer know was just reading an article. We got our hands on the actual motion. Let's look at it.
This feels incredibly connected to the intentional infliction of emotional distress claims made by the O'Keefe family against Karen Reed.
As a refresher, Paul O'Keefe, on behalf of John O'Keefe's estate, filed a lawsuit against the various bars for wrongful death and inflicting emotional distress on the kids.
In the civil lawsuit, in which she wants to include some of the defendants on this list potentially, or some law enforcement officers, lawyers for Brian and Nicole Albert.
Brian, last name Albert.
Nicole Albert, A-L-B-E-R-T.
Jennifer and Matthew McCabe.
Jen!
Matthew McCabe.
And Brian Higgins.
Brian Higgins.
Argue in a new brief recently served on Reed's legal team. If anybody has access to that brief, send it to me.
I know a lot of people that want to get their hands on his briefs, but we got it first.
All 5 witnesses attended an ill-fated after-party at the Alberts home in Canton, where O'Keefe's badly wounded body was found in the snow on January 29, 2022. Prosecutors allege Reed drunkenly backed her SUV into O'Keefe while dropping him off at the gathering, but she claimed investigators and after-party guests conspired to frame her. During a September hearing in the civil case, Reed's lawyers announced her plans to bring legal action against several witnesses and Massachusetts State Police investigators, further complicating the proceedings.
In September, Karen Reed's attorneys announced that they were going to file third-party claims against various defendants. The question before the court is, should they consolidate all the cases into this one or have Karen file separate lawsuits? Let's watch.
Reed is seeking to combine her conspiracy and civil rights claims with the wrongful death suit for efficiency's sake. The Alberts, McCabes, and Higgins are asking that Reed's motion be denied and her claims filed in a separate case. They want this to be in a separate case because then they can respond and countersue her potentially for defamation all in one court.
A part of the argument that McAlbert's attorneys are making is if the courts consolidate all the cases, it's going to expand the time for which the current case will actually take.
The Commonwealth witnesses vigorously dispute defendant Reed's allegations and will defend against these false claims. That their defense will include motions to dismiss, a potential request to move the claims to federal court, and counterclaims against both Reed and Turtleboy blogger Aidan Kearney for defamation and other torts that they have committed individually and in concert. That's a big deal. Lawyers for the Alberts, McCabe's, and Higgins said they plan to seek justice in a separate action over allegations that Reed and Kearney defamed and substantially injured them through a myriad of false statements. Combining those defamation claims with Reed's conspiracy claims, the O'Keefe's wrongful death lawsuit is procedurally improper at this stage and will make for a much more sprawling case, the lawyers argue. Notably absent from the opposition brief is Brian and Nicole Albert's nephew, Colin Albert.
How are you?
Please state your name and spell your last name.
I do not remember.
Who was also present at 34 Fairview the night that O'Keefe died.
The evidence has established that little Colin Albert left the house at approximately 12:15. John O'Keefe didn't arrive to 12:24, making it impossible for Colin to have committed this crime. However, because we missed Brian Higgins threatening John O'Keefe just 30 minutes before he actually killed him on video at the waterfall, we looked to Colin as a scapegoat. He simply wasn't there at that time.
While Reed previously sought to implicate Colin Albert in her third-party culprit theory, she has not named him in her civil conspiracy claims.
That's huge, and I said it before. If Karen Reed doesn't name Colin Albert, that's going to tell the world they know he had nothing to do with this murder, because if they failed to name him, it would not only be legal malpractice, it would be unethical.
They're building and building and building until eventually they are going to explode. Building and building and building until eventually they are going to explode. And it may explode in the form of multiple lawsuits with everybody suing each other. Explode. Will this all be combined with the O'Keefe's wrongful death lawsuit? So to me, more people jumping into this, more lawsuits or claims potentially being filed, makes more sense to consolidate it all together.
In their opposition, the McAlberts attorneys claim that Karen Reed and Turtleboy conspired to defame them. This is important because if they're able to prove that somehow Karen Reed is liable for Turtleboy's actions, then she's subjected to potentially even greater damages if Turtleboy was incorrect.
Because if this is really going to spread into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lawsuits, depending on if any of them get consolidated, that is not judicially economical. All along, I thought they were not going to be consolidated. I would say I'm being pulled more and more in that direction to where maybe it actually doesn't make sense. For a defamation claim, you need to have specific statements. And if you're saying Karen Reed and Turtleboy separately, those are two very different defendants. Turtleboy has said so much more than Karen Reed.
This is why I believe Colin Albert was involved in the murder. Colin Albert lied his fucking face off. You know how because people are like, do you guys think, well, Colin Albert didn't do it? Loophole Lawyer, who's a very funny guy, very witty guy. His two thing is, Colin Albert did not kill John O'Keefe. The real person who killed John O'Keefe was
Brian Higgins.
Brian Higgins. Brian does that thing. No, he thinks it was just Higgins.
Sending somebody flowers?
And Colin Albert was not there, and Jennifer McCabe did not Google how long did I cold. Those are his two things he sticks to. Both incorrect. Both incorrect.
Karen Reed's been more coy, or they know more than they're saying, or you guys know who we're talking about, or you know who was in that house, or whatever it may be, which, can potentially get to factual statements.
And here's the text from the actual document. Defendant Reed and Mr. Kearney, both in concert and separately, have defamed and substantially injured the Commonwealth witnesses.
Turtleboy has come out and said a lot more than that. But Turtleboy is also going to say, free speech, and these are my opinions and whatever. But opinions can become defamatory if they are turning more into factual allegations or something that can be proven and disproven. And a fact like this person committed this crime, or those are the real killers, statements like that are not necessarily just opinion statements, especially when you say, here's all the evidence I have, here are the people I'm talking to, I've got inside sources.
What about if I say the real killer is
Brian Higgins?
Would that be defamatory?
This is why I believe Colin Albert was involved in the murder. Colin Albert lied his fucking face off.
So we can get how those defamatory statements could come into a lawsuit and be allegations of defamation. The number one and most important defense to every defamation case is absolute truth. So what is this going to open the door to? On the O'Keefe, law enforcement, Alberts, McCabe side, if they're going to try to say Turtleboy was Karen Reed's agent or they conspired to do this together, one thing they might want is to try to get more communication between Karen Reed and Aidan Kearney and prove they were working together and she was feeding him information and spilling stuff to him.
And that's the exact allegations being made by the McAlberts lawyer in the opposition.
So it's going to open up discovery for all these people that are planning on filing these either lawsuits or counterclaims that Karen Reed's going to get a lot more information than she has. I think there's a lot of secrets on that side. Not sure how many secrets there are on the Reed-Kearney side because, in fact, they either were or currently are criminal defendants having to turn over their cell phone, having to turn over so much more information, having their lives dug into and witnesses against them dug up and coming forward. a lot more than the people on the other side of this lawsuit than Karen Reed and Aidan Kearney.
Wow, Peter's as smart as he is handsome. He brings up a great point. Any party that files a defamation lawsuit subjects themselves to discovery. What we want to see is Brian Higgins and Brian Albert's telephone records, and of course where they were on that morning between the hours of 12 midnight and 6 a.m.
Plaintiff has sued defendant, which would mean the McCabe's, Alberts, Higgins have sued defendant, could be Turtleboy or Karen Reed, for making false statements about him, her, it. So it has to be about them. It can't just be I'm innocent, I didn't hit John O'Keefe, something else happened. Concerning, and then you have to actually explain what are these defamatory statements, which I'm really interested to see for Karen Reed specifically. I'm sure they've got a bunch they can pick from Turtleboy. Prove a defamation claim. Plaintiff must show, more likely than not, again, the 51%, the following things are true. That defendant made, meaning published, posted, emailed, a factual statement about plaintiff to someone else. So it's definitely going to be about the plaintiffs to someone else. I could see how, especially in Turtleboy, right? You can just picture clips from some of his shows, I'm sure, being, exhibits in this case. Karen Reed's, I think, might be a little bit more difficult. The statement was false. And here's the other big one. Well, that opens up for Karen Reed and Turtleboy to prove the truth of what they said. So any discovery that goes to prove that this conspiracy is true is discoverable. Anything that could even reasonably lead to discoverable material. Could be location data on all of these people for months and even years following John O'Keefe's death. And not just them, but maybe their kids and other family members that Turtleboy and Karen Reed could convince a judge are arguably involved. The defendant was at fault for making the statement. The statement caused plaintiff economic loss,
which is just a fancy term for damages.
Defendant was at fault if she, he, it knew that the statement was false. Did he have evidence and documentation and text messages and witness statements that made him truly believe what he was saying was true? So even if eventually it's demonstrably false and everybody knows it's false, and maybe even Turtleboy eventually believes it's false, at the time he made the statements, did he know they were false? Or even without knowledge, was at fault if he or she was reckless or negligent about whether the statement was true or false? Meaning, if somebody called and said, aliens told me the McCabe's and Alberts did this, and Turtleboy's like, well, I have evidence, now I believe it's them. That's not reasonable, that's reckless, that's negligent. Did he know they were false or should have known they were false when he said them?
That means the law analyzes what the person knew or should have known. If someone lacked the mental capacity to actually know something is false, we still are going to judge them based upon what a reasonable person would have known. Even if Turtleboy claims to have some information to make a representation that Colin Albert was involved in the murder of John O'Keefe, is there enough information and documents out there that a reasonable person would conclude that he wasn't involved?
As a defense, defendant claims that the statement was substantially true. If you agree, then you must find for the defendant. Unlike on most other issues, it is the defendant, not the plaintiff, who has the burden to prove more likely than not that the statement was true.
That simply means that a defamation claim will be dismissed if the defendant can prove the statement was true, and the burden shifts to the defendant to prove that it wasn't true. To be clear, no defamation lawsuit has been filed against Karen Reed, Turtleboy, or the company that owns this channel. You could interpret this document as a bluff by the McAlberts to file a defamation claim. In fact, nothing's stopping them from filing it today. While we never give legal advice on this channel, and if you ever have a legal question, consult your own attorney, we won't stop producing these videos until the real killer,
Brian Higgins,
is brought to justice. This crime was very simple to solve because it took place within a very small area over a very short period of time with a very limited amount of suspects. One or more of these 10 people has to be the killer of John O'Keefe. That's how easy this is. Once you remove the kids and the McCabe's, you're down to just 3 suspects: Brian Albert, Higgy Bear, and Chloe. Since Chloe's a good dog, she didn't do it, so that leaves just 2 suspects, Brian Albert and Higgy Bear. But of the 2 Brians, only one had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe, and that's our old cuddly but violent Higgy Bear. Once we had all the facts and didn't jump to conclusions, do you see how easy it was to solve this crime?